Tonight's talk show is the second of our four-part series that will take place every Wednesday evening throughout the month of August 2026. Through this engagement, we seek to foster meaningful conversations that will contribute to the discussions, priorities, and outcomes of the African Conference on Economic Development and Innovation, ACoEDI 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our esteemed guest speakers. We have Dominic Ramos, an economist in the climate and public economics practice area at DNA Economics. His work focuses on sustainable development, climate finance, and climate adaptation and mitigation, with a particular interest in how African economies industrialize and grow under tightening carbon rules and shifting trade conditions. He has developed decarbonization pathways for South African manufacturing, assessed the implications of the European Union's carbon border adjustments mechanism for iron, steel, and aluminium exporters, and examined the barriers facing small enterprises seeking to participate in the green economy. Other areas of work include private capital mobilization for municipal infrastructure, regional trade and logistics in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and green economy monitoring across the finance, water, waste, and agriculture sectors. He has also worked on the impacts of climate and economic shocks on rural agricultural producers in West Africa for the UNDP and FAO. He holds an MA in International Relations from the University of Witwatersrand and is currently furthering his research on the human security implications on sustainable climate development support between the European Union and Sub-Saharan Africa. Good evening, Mr. Ramos, and welcome. Mr. Ramos? While he's still connecting, allow me to introduce our second speaker. Ephias Ruhode is a scholar in digital business transformation based in the School of Digital Technology, Innovation and Business at the University of Staffordshire in the United Kingdom. He joined the University of Staffordshire from the School of Business and Creative Industries at the University of the West of Scotland in the United Kingdom. He has previously held academic positions at the University of the West of Scotland and leadership roles in South Africa, including Associate Professor of Digital Business in University of the Witwatersrand Wits Business School, Associate Professor of Transdisciplinary Studies and Head of Faculty Research at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. He is a globally engaged scholar who has successfully supervised numerous doctoral and postgraduate students and is currently supervising research across several institutions, including the University of South Africa School of Business Leadership, Nelson Mandela University Business School, Midland State University in Zimbabwe, and Milk Park Business School in South Africa. He is widely recognized for his contributions to international scholarly discourse, frequently delivering keynote addresses and participating in global academic forums. He has an extensive publication record with numerous peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, and conference papers published in reputable international outlets. Ephias has led and contributed to multiple internationally funded research projects supported by organizations such as ORCID, Erasmus Plus, and others. He is also actively involved in community engagement, policy advisory, and capacity building initiatives, including funding the Apex Center for Transdisciplinary Development, an organization that seeks to advance inclusive, ethical, and sustainable development in Africa through research, dialogue, capacity building, and knowledge translation, while also contributing to public scholarship through blog articles and as an columnist of digital transformation in Zimbabwe's Financial Gazette, reaching a wide regional audience. Ephias holds a Doctor of Technology in Information Technology, and he is a Fellow of the UK Higher Education Academy, member of the UK Academy of Transformation Systems, member of the British Academy of Management, and member of the Chartered Association of Business School. Good evening, Professor Ephias. I noted that Mr. Ramos finally joined. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and everyone else.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Good evening,
Professor,
Matilda.
good evening.
How
are you?
Good to meet you.
Good, thanks, and welcome to the talk show.
Unfortunately, my
Without
video is not okay. Let me just change location.
Okay, while you're busy doing that, allow me to introduce the host of the show, Dr. Albert Jeleni, a South African economic development expert, innovation strategist, and business leader with over 24 years of experience in economic development, water resource economics, enterprise development, and institutional transformation. He serves as president of the Limpopo Chamber of Commerce and Industry, president of the National Union of Local Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and a board member of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As founder of IfEDI Africa, BizWise, and Trade Hub, he works to advance entrepreneurship, investment, innovation, and sustainable economic growth across Africa. He holds a PhD in local economic development and is recognized for his leadership in building partnerships between business, government, and communities. Good evening, Dr. Jeleni.
Good evening. Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, colleagues. It's quite a pleasure to meet everyone. And dare I say, the whole world is here. I can see different continents represented, and of course, a couple of countries in Africa in particular. I'm going to take you through my presentation. The intent is just to talk a little bit about the Institute for Economic Development and Innovation, which is the one that is organizing the conference ACoEDI 2026. And of course, I'm going to touch a little bit on what we are hoping to achieve in tonight's discussion. And whatever I'm going to say is not meant to rein in on the various speakers that are going to speak. I would like to believe that they will still be able to speak their minds, and freely so. What I'm going to share is just to help us at the end of the day be able to consolidate what we need towards the conference. Colleagues, the presentation does show that this is specifically for this talk show today, and I'm going to give you a highlight of what is the Institute for Economic Development and Innovation Africa. We are a continental professional body dedicated to advancing ethical, evidence-based, and impact-driven economic development practice across Africa. We are in the same league as any of the professional bodies that you may know. If I were to give an example, in South Africa, the professional body that regulates accounting or accountancy and chartered accountants, or a professional body that regulates, for example, the legal practice or the engineering practice. We have not had such an institution in Africa, while the rest of the world has been leading for the past 100 years. In particular, the International Economic Development Council that is based in America is celebrating 100 years this year. And really, for me, that means that we may be 100 years behind in terms of the art of economic development. And it's something that we are seeking to advance in this space, just to make sure that we can make sure that we are competitive and we are together with the rest of the globe. Chairperson, I forgot to ask if my presentation is visible. It is visible. Thank you so much. I'm going to proceed. As you can see that we have got 5 pillars on the right of the presentation. That's what drives us. Pillar number 1, which is A, is professional membership and recognition. This is really common for most of the professional bodies, colleagues. And then pillar number 2, certification and designation. Again, this is common for most of the professional bodies. However, in this case, in the economic development space, we have more fields than many other institutions. For example, we have got 19 fields, and that would accommodate many more qualifications. Unlike, for example, with the Legal Practice Council, where you are admitted if you have got a qualification in law. In the economic development space, we take even a lawyer, we take even an engineer, and we make sure that we can certify them of capable of playing in the economic development space. We also have a code of conduct that guides institutions, and we also have the institutional certification, meaning that if an institution says that they are working in the economic development space, we are able to gauge and grade that and say that it is capable of achieving its mandate. My computer tends to be very jealous when I'm doing presentations. It doesn't want you to see everything that I am showing you. Pillar number 3, it's learning, formation, and CPD, which is common for most of the professional bodies that we are having. I'm wondering why does it keep on kicking me out? And then pillar number 3 is research, policy, and advisory. And pillar number 5 is ecosystem building and excellence, of which what we are doing is part of that, and the conference that is upcoming is part of that. Just perhaps to summarize the difference between our professional body and any other professional body that is focused on a single qualification is the fact that, number 1, we draw from multiple professional persons or qualifications. And we do certifications on different levels from level 6 up until level 10, which is equivalent to a diploma up to a PhD. And we do while leaders need the code of conduct, we have a code of conduct that differentiates us, which is number 3. And number 4, we do certification for institutions themselves. That is a summary of the certifications that we have now. You realize that they are not focusing on any specific qualification at the university or college, but each can accommodate 1 or 2 of those. And you will see that the first one is certified local economic development practitioner. The second one, certified enterprise and supplier development practitioner. We've got certified incubation, acceleration, and venture building practitioners, certified public-private partnership practitioners. We've got certified innovation technology transfer. It jumped again, but at least I'm not the only one who's suffering. I can see some people are being kicked out of the session as well and have to come back. So certified business advisors, consultants, and strategists, certified trainers, facilitators, curriculum designers, certified assessors. Colleagues, I was reading so that I give you the appetizer to go through the whole certification that we are actually hosting. And then suffice to say that we do have one that focuses, which is number 16, certified data science, GIS, and economic intelligence practitioners, which may be relevant to what we are talking about today. Now, talking about the conference, colleagues, the conference is coming from the 1st to the 4th of September, and we are having these sessions as a build-up towards that conference. It's going to happen in Gauteng, and we have got 5 sub-themes that we are looking into. Different papers have been submitted that are going to be presented at the session. I'm not going to go through that. And colleagues, if you have not registered, you have an opportunity to register. And for those who wants to present, we may still accommodate you, but really the space is tight. And presenters are paying 7,200 to participate and be able to publish in our journal. And of course, the industry as well, they will be able to publish in our magazine. And if you just want to attend for knowledge, you pay 9,500. And we are going to issue a certificate in economic development and local economic development, also focusing on innovation as well as AI. And for you to qualify for that certificate, you're going to have to do additional 6 hours of training virtually, which will be split into 2 sessions, meaning 3 hours, 3 hours. Colleagues, I'm now going to just zoom in on what we have in mind regarding tonight's session, and I'm doing this to try and guide what we're thinking, but again, I do not want to rain on the speakers. I start from the understanding that at some point we used to talk about garbage in, garbage out. When the computers just came in, we were concerned about the quality of the inputs and how it affects the quality of the inputs. And I want to say to you tonight that what I think we are faced with now in the AI era is missing African context or data, which may translate to a confident but unreliable answers coming out of the system. And for those of you who have used AI, AI can triangulate, will take information that is there and makes an informed decision out of that. Meaning that where data is not there to dispute that, whatever it puts out there will be taken as the truth. Now, as I say this, it sounds like AI is just going to do that automatically. AI will not do that automatically. People will use AI to write papers, to put information out there with confidence. And they will then say that this is what we understand about South Africa. This is what we understand about Angola. This is what we understand about Swahili, for example. So we are in danger of that. So when reliable local evidence is scarce, AI can fill the gaps with dominant global patterns and important assumptions. We therefore need to make sure that languages, oral history, customs, informal economies, innovations, and climate realities are factored in. As I conclude, colleagues, I give you another slide where I am saying Africa agency means that we need to have some kind of control, but at the same time, we are not talking isolation. And that is critical. We need to have African context, but we need to be careful of not isolating ourselves. And 3 things I believe we must do there. We must look at an area which Africa must control, which I believe is strategic data sets, local language resources, ethical practice, and data governance standards. But we must also look at what we must share regionally as Africa: computing capacity, climate data and resilient infrastructure, skills, certification, and CPD. And that really goes to the heart of the existence of the Institute for Economic Development and Innovation. And lastly, buy globally with safeguards. That is affordable, auditable tools, portability and competition, clear jurisdiction. And this links to the 3 outputs that we're going to have from the ACoEDI, which is an atlas that gives us benchmarking annually to see what's happening in Africa and the world, a magazine that allows us to put what we are doing as the industry, and the journal that allows for peer review. Colleagues, with these words, and in short, all I am saying, welcome to this platform, and please feel free to contribute, and let's build Africa together and be competitive globally. And I believe by so doing, we are building the globe together. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Jeleni. AI depends on data and computing power, but also on reliable energy, connectivity skills, finance, and capable institutions. Which foundation is Africa most at risk of neglecting? In which sectors would failure be most costly? And what evidence should guide priorities over the next 5 years? Mr. Ramos.
Thank you very much. So I would like to also thank IfEDI for inviting me to this talk. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to engage further, especially as we move into the digital platform. And it's actually very topical. So we at DNA Economics have been focusing quite a lot on the intersection between investment, finance, climate, moving forward into the AI age. We know AI brings forward a lot of new opportunities, but also a lot of new challenges. And these challenges become ever more present when we look at how they interact with our local communities, our languages, especially on a continent that is so strained in terms of economic resources, namely finance, mobilizing private finance. But AI presents for us a unique opportunity. And this takes me back a bit. Thinking back in 2023, I spent a great deal of time in meetings and many other engagements with the European Commission, the South African DTIC, more or less on the various issues that we face with dealing in major manufacturing and industry. And that is what I think we should look at when we look at AI. It is an industry. It is a form of manufacturing coming to the African continent. And that in itself poses several challenges. And at DNA Economics, we've been focusing quite a bit on these challenges. So one is raising the private capital to support both our communities, to ensure that there's environmental security and that there is fiscal responsibility in the project that we invest. We know AI itself requires significant sectoral investments in different forms of data centers. We need chip manufacturing. There's community inputs needed. And then there's also the issue of renewable energy and water. And so these are all areas that we need to really take into consideration. And I think what becomes very important when we do look at this is we are about to do the same thing with AI infrastructure, AI development on the continent as what has previously happened with the previous climate booms and climate shocks coming from the European trade deals, from CBAM and the European Green Deal. What we are seeing, and just to note, AI itself is only about 3 years old in its current mainstream form. And so it's still a very burgeoning industry. And there's a lot of opportunity on the continent for that industry. However, I would argue in this sense that we need to really mobilize different forms of capital, social, and environmental factors to really make sure that our communities benefit from it and that we can use it to develop key systems such as early warning systems. Now, on that backdrop, I do want to pose a very controversial statement. We often piggyback on AI as this wonderful innovation and tool. However, this tool is only as useful as it is able to instill value into our communities. Rural communities often struggle from water shortages. In South Africa, we have municipal issues with water, so water availability shifts around. And AI itself requires significant investment infrastructure. One is on the data side. So we need to look at where our data is flowing. We look at, say, digital trade in this regard. Two, who is impacted by it? So in this instance, we look at the communities, the country as a whole, and then of course regional countries. So we look at the RECs in the case of the African Union. And then three, we finally look at the broader value that is brought into both innovation and digital development. And so within this regard, AI itself is truly a unique opportunity, but also not something that we can dive into. Investor confidence really depends on limiting risk, but it's not a capital issue. So I previously mentioned, as we've noted, that we throughout Africa have struggled with capital investments. We are under-resourced. AI brings a unique change to that. AI is not underfunded. It is highly capital intensive. And throughout the global north, where there are mature systems to support it, this has been very beneficial when you look at the financial element of it. In the United States, massive investments in stocks, capital expenditure has driven AI to innovate and improve. I would argue for Africa, we might need to take a different approach. While the financial aspect of it is very important, AI must also provide value in the social and environmental aspect. We do have methods, we do have models, and we do have means to promote it, but that should be the core of it. That is the business case, in my opinion, of promoting AI in Africa, but also making sure that it is sustainable for our communities, that it isn't sustainable for our environment. Green climate finance has largely been at the end of global development organizations. Let's use AI to shift that narrative. Let's use AI to shift that narrative in a sense that we can both have the financial aspect dealt with to help improve our communities, so we can actually use AI in major disaster relief management systems. We can use AI to help us support in city planning. We can even use it for spatial analysis, looking at where there might be any climate hindrances, but also shifting it across many different boundaries. And that is the key point here. AI itself is not a single denominator, it is an industry. It should be treated as an industry that fits within our national frameworks, an industry that fits within our communities, but also one that we can regulate and we can approach with pragmatically. I think here that the AFCFTA is the ideal tool, at least, that we can use to guide the development of AI, especially if we look at AI in cross-border arrangements. We know AI is very energy hungry, and energy is not a universal factor here, and there might be energy shortages in some areas. However, there might not be in other areas, but working collaboratively, we can really offset this and make AI a valuable regional impacting industry. With that all noted, I do think we have a long way to go. The Africa Digital Trade Protocol has highlighted very much on the key issues of data. However, in the sense of environmental data, we at DNA have worked quite a bit in that space, especially tracking how environmental data is moved and assessed regionally, but also locally. In Africa, that's not always the case. We see a lot of the weather data patterns often being foreign funded through developmental aid or concessional finance. And in the same vein, a lot of that data also shifts more to the European side. Looking at, say, weather stations, a lot of that information is fed over to Germany. Looking at, say, geographic analysis, a lot of that moves over to the UK. So when we do promote AI, we also need to look at taking a unified African approach, both within the regions, nationally, and even more broadly on protecting that information. Protecting our local information is also a value chain issue. It's much easier to get the information from a local weather station using AI to model it to help us assess if there's any dangers in several key areas, and then building upon that. Currently, what would happen is you would receive the information, it would shift abroad, and then it would have to retrieve it back. If there's any break in that chain, it could cost us. And that's where the value truly comes in, because the cost will not just be physically, but it would also be socially and environmentally. On the final point I'd like to make on AI, we need to truly think of it as not just building a single industry and being at the forefront of innovation for the sake of innovation. AI itself is the mechanism to bolster everything surrounding AI. It can help us mobilize capital to offset the dire straits of municipalities, cities in Africa who are under-resourced. It can help us mobilize the capital to build renewable energy, and it can help us mobilize the capital to make sure that any water that is used through AI or any other process is sustainable. And that is my final key point here, is that while we have our reservations on AI, and I do think it will take quite a long time for us to actually engage with it, we at DNA see it as an enabler. It enables investment. And so with those points made, I think that stands at the core, one of the core areas that us at DNA Economics have been focusing on. The climate and public economics team has been focusing substantially on combining the different viewpoints from private sector, public sector, and looking at alternatives. And in that, we have now finally reached, I think, my time. But I do think that we have a long way to go in utilizing AI, but also making sure AI does not jump ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos, for that all-rounded background. Prof. Ruhode, what is your take on the same question?
Thanks, Mapula and your team for inviting me, and I want to greet everyone in the room. I'm actually excited that I have got my current PhD students in the room and previous students. This is quite encouraging. Mapula, you asked a question that which foundation matters to Africa? And you mentioned some. I agree with Dominic that AI is an industry which must be designed, which must be developed, which must be governed, which then leads me to my most important foundation on the continent, which is institutional capacity. So neglecting institutional capability, I think, is our biggest risk and our biggest challenge on the continent. We have always focused on visible infrastructure. You talk of your data centers, your computing capacity, your electricity, your broadband. Whilst these are essential, but countries can invest heavily in these things. It's fine. But for us to achieve a meaningful AI enabled development, we need to make sure that our institutions are functional, they are operational. I have done a lot of IT projects. You develop and deploy an IT project in one organization and try to replicate it in another, it fails because of institutional capability, because of the social norms, because of belief systems, because of how people just behave. So I would therefore distinguish between having AI infrastructure and having the institutional capacity to use it productively. So Africa should of course, be careful not to become primarily a consumer of AI products that are coming from elsewhere, designed and hosted and governed elsewhere. If we do that, then we will have the cost of failure being very high in education, in healthcare, in all other sectors. So we should not have weak institutions, because if we do, we will end up having poor quality data, we will end up having inappropriate systems, we will end up having problems that come back to us. I've actually written a lot in terms of newspaper contributions around these. So over the next 5 years, I would therefore argue for evidence-driven prioritization rather than technology-driven investment. Governments and institutions should ask, where are our biggest developmental problems? What data do we have? What data do we need? Where is this data? Who owns it? What is happening to this data? There must be understanding around that. So yes, we have got issues of energy, we have got issues of infrastructural development, and so on. But we should design what we need. First, we should identify the requirements. We should, design the skills metrics that we have and that we need to deploy AI solutions. So we should have what I call institutional readiness. Yes, we can talk of data centers. I know there's one, being under construction in South Africa and then Kenya and somewhere in Maghreb region there. But it's not about financial capacity. It is about us understanding why we need AI and how we must govern AI. So I will not proceed on that. I will, like I said, I agree 100% with what my colleague has said. So let me pause for now. Thanks, Mapul.
Thank you, Prof. Mr. Ramos, how should African countries assess the economic case for AI and data infrastructure when electricity reliability, water availability, carbon exposure, physical climate risk, foreign currency costs, and technology obsolescence are included, and when is a regional investment more credible than a national one?
So this is actually a very nuanced question, and I think it's really helpful to consider on how AI has developed, both as my colleague mentioned at the data center side, but also on the regulation approach and capital side. AI has a lot of capital in which it can use to build renewable energy plants or use existing energy networks. But the problem here lies is that the business case is tied to a small set of strong or large African economies, while excluding the others. And this is what attracts AI. This is what attracts both the usage of its models, so where you have your consumers and your users, and also where you build these data centers. And that requires a significant investment in water and electricity infrastructure. So what then this would lead is to the need for financial systems to develop this infrastructure and making those bankable. And that's the big challenge that there is making it bankable, because bankability is not solely a financial constraint. African countries often lack the institutions or the systems to regulate or deal with it, and that's why we often refer major regional challenges to, say, your regional REC, or you refer to the African Union. So there needs to be an institutional will a political and institutional will to drive the capital that we're receiving from AI into renewable energy. The impact here is enormous because energy itself needs to benefit the community as well. It cannot just benefit the AI data centers. And when there is no institutional capacity, all of that energy is directed towards the AI industry, which leaves many African governments, institutions quite vulnerable. We see this already playing out with water. Water is highly AI intensive in terms of the infrastructure, but also the consumers of AI are in key areas where water consumption is relatively high. Your large corporate businesses using AI, some of your manufacturers are now shifting over to AI to help smooth their processes. And for a continent that's industrializing, these are several key factors that need to be taken into account. It's currently not taken into account. And so what happens is the AI industry centers around a single country. If we look at, say, Southern Africa, we see it centers around South Africa. If we look at ECOWAS, it centers around Nigeria. And this is problematic because now we're putting strain on the single economic hub who has maybe some structures, not all of it, while offloading, say, any regional benefits that there could be. And that single country also then has to take on all of the environmental risks that come with AI. It has to take on the water, it has to take on renewable energy. If AI emits emissions, that must form part of their NDCs. So the way that this can be bolstered is to really promote spreading out AI development across regions and developing interconnected network systems. A colleague of mine, Daniel Tate, Dr. Daniel Tate, was doing his PhD on regional electricity diplomacy, actually sums up this in a very unique way. He notes that we can use various industries in various different countries to improve the interconnectedness of electrical networks and shifting electrical networks off of diesel, off of coal, and so forth, and to power these industries. And we can do the same with AI. It's just we are currently concentrating it on the high performers. And so that is where I'm in agreement with my colleague Ephias that we really need to shift our thinking towards developing the structures and looking at the systems governing AI. When we do it at a national level, do we place too much burden on your local communities? Doing it at the regional level, do we exclude some of the developing African countries? And even looking at more of a continent-wide, how do we ensure that trade, especially the trade in data, is protected in the sense that it develops a whole range of input industries of renewable energy while maintaining water sustainability. On the question of foreign exchange, I think it's quite difficult at the moment to speak of foreign exchange specifically because AI investment is so large. And it is specifically tied, I would more or less say, in an industry bubble. We've heard that quite a lot. And because it is an industry bubble, any foreign exchange shift, such as the Strait of Hormuz crisis, will directly affect African inputs into AI data centers. In our case, it's electricity, as you often need diesel for diesel generators and so forth, which means that that resource itself shifts away from the communities and it shifts directly to AI development. And because we do not have strong institutions that we still need to develop, that hinders local development and community outreach. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Before we go to Prof. Ruhode, I want to pose a question to our audience. And the question is, which important decision in your sector is currently weakened by missing, poor quality, unrepresentative, or inaccessible data? And what specific data improvement would change that decision? I repeat the question. Which important decision in your sector is currently weakened by missing, poor quality, unrepresentative, or inaccessible data? And what specific data improvement would change that decision? We'll come back to it after Prof. Ruhode answers his question. So, Prof, before an institution acquires AI tools, what sequence of data inventory, process redesign, governance, workforce capability, and use case selection is needed to so adoption becomes a real transformation? And what can a resource constrained institution complete within 12 months? Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would go back to my original emphasis of institutional capacity. So my approach there would be to have an institution first sequence. Africa should not measure its AI readiness or AI capacity by the number of data centers it acquires, but it should measure itself by the capacity it has to turn that computing power into some economic value. And we're not doing it. We're just talking AI. So in terms of the sequence, I'm talking about institution first. Start with institutional problems. You must unpack and interrogate institutional problems, not AI products. Before asking which AI tool should we buy, leaders should rather ask, where are we losing money? Where are we losing time? Where are we compromising on quality? Where are we losing institutional knowledge? Where are we not building institutional knowledge? And which of these problems could the AI realistically solve? That is fundamental. And to me, that is the first point. Now, then, of course, you then conduct, you're talking about data inventory, then that's where now you go, if it is, like you're saying, a resource constrained organization, then it must look at the minimum viable data inventory. Build that data inventory. You don't need a sophisticated enterprise data architecture to do that, but you must know what data you have in the company, in the organization. Who owns that data? Where is it? Who has got access to that data? It's in what format? What is the quality of that data? Like you say, what are the sensitivities around the data? What are the security issues around the data? So that is the next step after having identified your problem, and then you go and say, no, look here, now let us at the minimum try to construct some data inventory by identifying our data assets within the organization. Then you do your process mapping. You redesign your processes. So basically, when you're redesigning your processes, sorry, this just happened. Yeah. So you look at the current state. What are you doing? Then ask which activities should be eliminated, which activities should be simplified, which activities should be standardized, which ones should be digitized. You must be able to identify the processes within within your organization, which ones must be automated and which ones must be AI assisted. It might be payroll, it might be HR. Identify those not in a wholesome format, but just one by one, so that you understand the process requirements and the data that you'll have. Then you put as the next phase in the sequence your governance structures in place. We're talking about a resource restricted or resource constrained institution here. You don't put together a big AI governance department or group or something like that, but there must be some champions who understand acceptable and prohibited AI uses, who know about confidential and personal data, how to handle that data, who can have an oversight and accountability over third-party AI, AI tools. Those are quite problematic in organizations. Yeah, things to do with intellectual property. So you need your governance structures in place. Then the next phase would be to build capacity in terms of skills development. AI literacy should actually precede AI deployment and is important. Like I've said, I have done a lot of writings, and there are some articles, not academic articles, but newspaper, what we call academic citizenship articles. I've written quite a lot on that. That before you deploy technology, make sure that there is understanding of that technology from the internal stakeholder, who is your employees. Then obviously you create a use case portfolio. I've spoken about HR, I've spoken about manufacturing. Those areas might actually form your use case. You deploy your AI in that space, because it is a small organization. Then, of course, you acquire more technologies and grow as you make further decisions. You said what can realistically be achieved within 12 months. For a resource constrained or resource restricted institution, I would structure the first year as a minimum viable AI transformation program without looking at tangible revenue benefits, but just AI transformation program. So you measure the level of AI literacy in the organization, or digital literacy in general, which I have also written as DQ, digital quotient, the level of appreciation of technology in the organization. You spend time, 1 to 3 months, doing the assessment and also, understanding the needs. Then in the next maybe 2 or so months, you redesign and prioritize what I said. You redesign your processes, and then you might spend a month or 2 again piloting, rather than proliferating, rather than a wholesale deployment. You pilot, and just spend a month or 2 again on evaluating and scale selectively. And then you probably have got one month or 2 left that you would document what you will have found out. So I think that would be a good approach for a small organization. And it is also quite important that everyone must be on board. If it is a medium organization, everyone should be on board. So yeah, so we have to look at this kind of change, like Dominic said, as happening inside an industry, in AI being an industry. So what are the characteristics of that industry? So we must move the entire organization along. So that's what I can say for now.
Thank you, Prof. So the
Thank you.
phrase African data can become a slogan. What tests should determine whether data is a representative, lawful, current, interoperable, and fit for a specific African decision, covering language, informal activity, geography, gender, provenance, consent, and community challenge rights, and who should be accountable for those tests? Mr. Ramos, can we start with you?
Yes. So I think when it comes to the idea of African data, it's always a question of where does the data lie, as you mentioned. I think the major test that we can place in this would be making sure that Africans have direct access and training, specifically before implementing or employing any model, and that they are the ones who vet it. A lot of these AI models, data sets that are very useful in pooling specific information do not get to engage as much with the nuances that we face within our communities. And because they do not face with those communities, they cannot be integrated or utilized to their maximum potential. And so within this, local financing models, so blended financing models, if we look at climate assessment models, need to be conducted at least with the eye of individuals and institutions from the continent and specifically from the region where they're operating at. That should be the key test. We cannot rely on data shifting around from external servers. We cannot rely on external experts providing the data beforehand. This is something that there needs to be an internal skills development and internal support. And that's the question we need to ask, why? Why do it internally? Because we can provide the context for that. It will also help dealing with dependency. Right? If we have internal skills on how to use the AI model before deploying it, as my colleague said, before using it, then we can limit any major shocks or issues that would come due to AI. To make sure that it's safeguarded, we already have a few regional and continental agreements. I mentioned previously AFCFTA digital legislation, but that is something that also needs to be taken up more at the national level. I think it will be probably said to death, but we really need that institutional capacity to develop and legislate and regulate AI. It is something we don't have. You ask the question to a legislature, what will you do with this weather information? Will it be public? Will it be private? How do we assess it? They won't have an answer. And it's mainly because the framework and the structure is not there. And so that is something that we really need to look into. And this bleeds across the industry. If there's no way to stay front of AI will outpace you. And if it outpaces you, then simple data breaches can become a major issue, especially when dealing with cross-border data breaches, sensitive government information, sensitive public information. We cannot have that just be loosely regulated. Those need to be taken into account. And that's why we need local structures, local individuals, and local analysis. And that's the testing we can do. And I put the onus here both on companies and on governments. We know sometimes governments do not have the capacity to do so, to adequately regulate, legislate, but there needs to be a common ground. I think the question I leave here is one that we're not all clear to answer is who's going to mediate that common ground, and how do we make sure that AI companies or broader institutions do not overwhelm African governments with their vast amount of resources and investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Professor, how should Africa divide computing power across edge, national, regional, and global layers so it remains competitive without a wasteful self-sufficiency or digital dependency? And what safeguards on jurisdiction, auditability, portability, pricing, service continuity, and exit would limit data extraction, vendor lock-in, and capability loss?
Okay. Thank you. But before I go to the computing power question, Mapula, from the previous, contribution, I picked up something that I would want to summarize. That the first test is that we must, I think, stop asking whether the data is African and ask whether it is fit for the purpose to which we want to put the data. Because yes, you might have African data, but we must ask who is represented in that data and who is missing in that data. In as much as we might be interested in collecting geographical data, gender data, demographic data, and so on and so on, we might exclude a very important player called the informal economy within our data sets, because we might not know what is happening in Lusikisiki in terms of sweet potato growers. We might not know what is happening somewhere in the Luo province of Kenya in terms of some economic activity. So I think African data should be defined by the use to which it is put. Anyway, coming to a computing power question that you have asked, I think Africa should think in layers, not in binaries. No. The objective should not be to host everything locally because it's our data. No, to outsource everything globally because the global north has developed AI solutions they can as well give us. But the right thing is computing should sit closest to us, the African user. What should be national? What should be pulled regionally? In the region, in SADC, in ECOWAS, in Maghreb, in East African community. For example, health diagnostics data, agriculture data, what data can we put together? Can we pull together nationally, regionally, and globally? And how can we benefit out of that? So at the national level, governments need sufficient sovereign capability for sensitive public data, identity systems, critical infrastructure, regulatory functions, and a lot of other strategic data sets. So every country trying to build a complete AI stack on its own independently would face a lot of challenges. But if we pull resources together, that would be good. So at the regional layer, which is also important, we should look at what data should be shared. I've just mentioned agricultural data here, health data. There is a pandemic, health pandemic that has happened in SADC region. We must be able to share the data. At the global layer, should still be used where a hyperscale computing or some frontier models are being pushed, which benefit us, some specialist services, which can benefit us. So the goal is therefore strategic interdependence rather than isolation or dependence. So, but architecture alone is not enough. Africa needs strong contractual and regulatory safeguards. Those are not there. We don't even know how Starlink is operating in our countries. We don't even know. We don't have regulatory safeguards around such kind of investments that come from the global north. So we must have a strong contractual and regulatory safeguards. So jurisdiction must be explicit. We must know where is the data, which laws apply, who is collecting data from our jurisdictions, for what purpose. So we should also have that auditability aspect, where governments and major institutions must be able to inspect logs, data flows. We talk about illicit financial flows from Africa. That song has been sung for decades. Or illicit financial flows, our minerals are going. Now there is illicit data flow. And we are not even taking cognizance of that. We are not even putting our guardrails around that. There is serious, illicit data flows. So portability and interoperability is also quite important. Data models and workloads should be exportable in usable formats. So supported by open standards and APIs, the application programming interfaces. So changing providers is actually possible, and it is realistic within our jurisdictions in African countries. So pricing transparency, particularly around storage, the compute capacity, we should actually be very cognizant of the fact that there is need for a low introductory price that can create positive results, especially from those that are from resource restricted environments. So yeah, there must also be those exit strategies, but to just summarize, digital sovereignty does not mean owning everything as Africa. It means retaining enough capability and optionality that dependence never becomes captivity. We should be able to interdepend without selling our souls, but we interdepend without compromising a lot, especially in data movement. So the test of a good African compute strategy is not whether infrastructure is locally owned, but whether Africa retains control over critical decisions, can switch providers, can audit what is happening, and continues to accumulate capability rather than exporting it. I will pause here.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Ramos, I'm sorry, I realized that I was muted. Your contribution to the computing power question?
On the computing power, I think the key thing to understand here is our African reliance on data systems and models, and the infrastructure surrounding it that is not within our control. And that is a really important question that we need to understand. A lot of the infrastructure is not something that we specialize in our own way. Chip making, as an example. And so all of this comes from external countries such as Taiwan. And that is something that we really need to take into account when we think of, as our colleague spoken about, in shifting on away from the data set focus. We can measure a lot of the data, we can put it through computing, but these models, they are not indicative of what we can do in our capacity, and that is our local capacity for African problems and African solutions, right? We see this in the divide between national, regional, and global layers and queries, right? We see this when we look at digital dependencies. Countries who have the means to purchase external infrastructure equipment are also those who deal with these large sets of data without understanding the depth of this information. And so the data alone is not the sole determinants here. And so I would more or less say that we need to shift our thinking away from solely where the data lies, as that is important, as we know a lot of it does shift around, but also who produces the data. Or we can speak about all of the schools in Jeleni, but it doesn't show you on the ground analytics. It doesn't show us what is going on the ground. And using a predictive AI model, I think, would be a bit detached from our reality. We must use it as a tool. However, I think currently the industry, as it would be shifting, because it's moving so rapidly, we often overlook these small nuances on data itself. But yeah, so that is more or less, it's a rather shorter response, mainly because my colleague covered quite a bit of what I was going to speak on as well. But I do think it's something that we need to shift a bit more around as well. We cannot concentrate it. We need to make sure communities also have access to the tools. Training is very important. And if we look at, say, business competitiveness, right? These models are often tied to large corporate establishments who build these large models to assess communities, business strategies, but they're not always that accessible to small scale businesses. And even though SMEs could use them, an SME could definitely use them to maybe do some predictive modeling. They don't have the skills, the know-how, the training, and so when they do input their data, that is for me a compromising factor. And so that's just something that we really need to think of and maybe look at how we can regulate or assess that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ramos. The audience, do you have the comments to my question that I posed earlier? I can only take one because we are running out of time. Anyone who wants to comment? Naledi, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, my name is Dr. Naledi Gallant, and I'm with NACI, which is actually a tech startup. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to this very profound, workshop, especially given the digital economy that we are currently in. And I just want to say, Dr. Ephias and Mr. Ramos have actually touched on some very important aspects, regarding, artificial intelligence. And I just feel that one of the fundamental problems, at the heart of digitizing Africa's informal economy, which is the space that Nike operates in, is how do we make informal economic activity visible and measurable without forcing it into categories that actually distort the reality of how people actually work. So I feel that, at the moment, pretty much of a large portion of artificial intelligence is centralized. And in order for us to make sure that we are able to correct representation, particularly on the African continent and within the informal economy, we should actually look at ways of decentralizing a lot of the information to make sure that the representation, represents the realities that are on the ground, meaning that this information and everything that's on AI needs to be contestable. And we need to start focusing on, going upstream as opposed to downstream. So just like, what Mr. Ramos said earlier, we could actually have somebody compiling information in Cape Town and, thinking that that represents the whole of South Africa. And it doesn't necessarily represent, certain parts of the rural areas. And it's quite important to make sure that in those parts, they're able to contest and be able to, fix that information so that we don't have a representation gap or a representation debt that accumulates over time. So I just feel like a lot of the information does get locked, and we need to be able to unlock it and contest it so that we are able to correct it as new information becomes available about the realities that are actually on the ground. So yeah, that is basically, what I wanted to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naledi, for your contribution. Speakers, I'm going to take you to the climate resilience question. How can AI strengthen forecasting, agriculture, energy, and resilience while ensuring compute infrastructure does not compete unfairly with households and productive sectors for power, water, land, and public finance? And what resource, carbon, and resilience disclosures should procurement require? I will start with you, Professor.
Thank you very much. I still refer to my colleague Dominic's observation that AI is an industry. So AI cuts across, our economic domains. So we are facing challenges with climate change. So AI can make a major contribution to Africa's resilience, but only if the infrastructure supporting AI does not undermine the very development objectives it is meant to advance. It's quite important, because right now, if we would interrogate, AI technologies that have been developed towards resilience in climate change, you'd see that none have been developed on our continent. So we therefore don't know again what happens, what else happens, besides just making our systems resilient. Something else can happen because that is not our technology. So in forecasting, AI can improve early warnings for droughts, floods, disease outbreaks, and food insecurity. In agriculture, it can support precision irrigation. A friend of mine was telling me about blueberry farms in Zimbabwe, that there is too much of precision agriculture there, which is quite a good development. So AI can support precision farming. It can support crop and pest monitoring. It can, weather informed planning and better market forecasting. AI can help test the soil, you know, so that some kind of crop rotation or something like that, can be implemented. AI can actually help detect possible losses from some agricultural yield. AI can do that. So those are the kind of AI technologies that we need that are fit for our context. If we appropriate AI technologies to um, to our irrigation areas, it must be able to predict the kind of yield and must do comparative analysis of the yield from the same hectareage that happened last year and what is the possible revenue that is going to come out of here. AI must be able to help us in that. Across disaster resilience, it can combine satellite, climate, infrastructure, and population data to identify vulnerabilities earlier and target interventions more effectively. They are doing that, after the I think it's 2011, if I'm not mistaken, tsunami. There are a lot of, responsive AI systems that have been deployed in the southern part of Japan. Been watching that, said, oh, look here, we also need that. We have had floods in Southern Africa many, many times. Recently with South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Malawi, experiencing experiencing storms and floods. Right now, there is something that had never been seen before. That KZN is is snowing. We should have systems that tell us what that phenomenon is, and to predict, the predictive systems, what's going to happen in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, if it is snowing at this rate just from nowhere. So we need to cast our minds and our focus, our thinking, and our resources into AI systems that are relevant to our climatic context within Africa. I think I might pause there.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Ramos, the same question.
Thank you very much. I think Prof already mentioned quite a bit on how we can use it, especially for early warning and alert systems, looking at droughts. The broader term is it can really help and support climate smart agriculture. So it's a really good predictive measure in forecasting that. And it's a really good tool that can draw in information very rapidly that we can use to assess. But I would like to shift focus a bit more on making sure it's sustainable. So using AI to predict disasters is also a bit of a contradiction to our approach in limiting key impacts from climate change itself. A lot of AI data centers are either tied to national grids, which are very, very dirty, still working with coal. And so managing that with, say, community needs is quite a contradictory challenge that we can definitely deal with, right? So we can bolster things such as renewable energy. So in that aspect, when we use AI to do forecasting, right, we can also, in that sense, use it as a tool to assess what impact it would have on the households who will be most affected by AI. We can look at, say, the water usage patterns right? So how much water would an AI data center use, and how much of that would come from the community? This does require substantial guardrails. And so the guardrails here would just be in alignment with carbon legislation. So in South Africa, we have the Climate Change Act and the Carbon Tax Act. If you apply to other African countries, they need relative similar legislation. So that's a way we can make sure that AI doesn't run rampant in energy utilization, water utilization. We can align it to global goals and commitments, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, and put regulatory caps. But that alone would not be enough, in my opinion. There also needs to be coherent social support, right? In order for us to make sure that it is viable, communities engagement is very important here. Communities need to be drawn into the conversation. When we speak of AI, we don't speak of pulling in your community members, speaking their language, seeing what bothers them, what tools they are using. If we think of, say, forecasting that, what tools they're using, you're running it through a large data model, or it's mostly companies doing lobbying or engaging. They are the ones who use the tool, so we expect them to be the ones who stick to using it for their means. They might sell products that could be used for agricultural forecasting. In that sense, there needs to be some form of public participation in that process. AI can be used as a wonderful tool, but it cannot be an exclusionary tool. It cannot exclude the communities affected. It cannot exclude even the communities it would be helping with these tools. Yeah, thank you very much. And as mentioned, Prof really highlighted everything, or at least everything from this discussion on the predictive capabilities and opportunities tied with AI in dealing with climate resilience, dealing with climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. We are left with 2 minutes. So in closing, if this conversation must produce one practical proposition for ACoEDI 2026, what should begin within 12 months? Who should own and finance it? And which no more than 3 indicators would show that it is improving development outcomes? Professor?
Thank you. Dr. I can't remember his name, the director, he gave overview of the organization. So I would just, you said 2 minutes, and it's still 2 minutes. You know, yes, the organization is offering accredited accreditations, but what I think is certification should answer a question, one question. Can the individual do it? Accreditation should answer, does the organization actually do it? And the code of conduct should answer what happens when they do it, when they do not. What I'm trying to say is, it should be an eye-opener to the organization, because we are in, our world is defined by volatility, by ubiquity, by ambiguity, and so on. So the changes that happen, AI is coming. What should AI do? So a certification that is obtained today, what is it doing to a person? What is it doing to the recipient? So I think there are some nuances there that have got to that are quite interconnected. There are factors that are that must be considered in terms of what is happening within the digital transformation in the AI world, because the effects cut across all sectors of the economies, where the organization is actually, finding itself relevant. So yeah, that's my last words.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Ramos?
Thank you very much. When I think of the accreditation, what we can look at it is to maybe ground it as well. I would say that looking at the development of AI, looking at how this conversation would move forward and who would finance it, we can really think of ourselves as a community in this regard. And financing it should come from all aspects. We have many different mechanisms, but we should ground it. And I really think that we need to look at the real world implications. And that's why I see we can provide a real value add within the next 12 months and moving forward. And so that is more or less on what I would say what we can look at when improving development outcomes. We can look at how these accreditations are analyzed on the ground in real life. And for me, at least, that would show a shift forward, an initiative that we can unite around. And that is especially needed when focusing with AI, especially a topic that is so difficult with so many different aspects and elements. And for me, that is what I think we can focus on moving forward for the conference, is building upon that, a unified, grounded approach, and making sure that these accreditations are based on the ground realities rather than very, I would say, very broad assessment and research. We can bring in a whole set of stakeholders together to focus on this problem, because AI itself is not uniform and it will never be uniform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramos. Dr. Jeleni, are you there? Please wrap up for us.
Colleagues, thank you very much, much appreciated. And while you were talking, just know that you were giving us an assignment, and who were listening, we realized that we have got a lot of work to do. You touched on a number of interesting things, which are really ringing in my head now. One of the things is the fact that AI is as good as how it helps really develop our people, and the fact that we need to also much focus on institutions, and really this touches on what IfEDI is all about. We need to make sure that we have got competent people, we have got competent institutions, but most importantly, we need to make sure that we are always on check. And that's why every year we want to meet in a conference where we look into what have we achieved, what needs to be done, and what is still relevant to be used, and what needs to be discarded. Colleagues, you have really added so much towards the conference, but even at this point in time, you have given us so much for us to be able to start to do some groundwork. And with these words, we really appreciate you. And for everyone who joined in, the things that needs to be done, those that have been said, we need to do them collectively. I am hoping that we have identified areas which will allow you to chip in and work with IfEDI going forward. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you to our distinguished speakers, our audience, and everyone committed to advancing Africa's development journey. The conversation does not end here. In many ways, it is only beginning. Let's connect again next week, Wednesday at 6:30 on the same platform. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, everyone, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.